When we're live, it says in stream. Oh, that means we're live?
Yeah, we're live, Adam. Welcome. Welcome. You notice we have a couple of guests with us today, along with Adam and me, our two regulars. Ben, a somewhat regular. Thanks for coming on with us, Ben. And Adam, do you want to introduce Talon and let us know what he's doing here?
Sure. Ben and Talon were best friends growing up, and they are going to talk about their lives together growing up. And then, no, that's not it.
That's awesome.
Talon is a friend of a friend. And when I told my friend that we were going to concentrate on our podcast until November 11th, that we were going to be, talking to guests, people that were vets and people who healed from all kinds of different, PTS or anything in life, really. She gave me his number. He agreed to talk to me. I talked to him. I thought he was amazing. He had some great stories and great insight. And I asked Talon, will you come on the podcast with us? He said, yes, I will, which was words that he'll regret later, but okay. So Talon, we're going to get to getting to know you and stuff, but A, first of all, thanks for coming on, and B, thanks for your service.
Awesome. Thank you. And shout out to Erica for setting this up. I'm happy to be here.
Yes. Yeah. Erica gave me your number and set that whole thing up. So, so let's talk a little bit about, give us a little bit about who you are, where you came from, what kind of service did you do? What kind of things, have you gone through? What's your healing process like? Give us a little background.
Well, that's a lot in one sentence, but let's get after it.
Yeah.
So I was actually born in a really small town in California, and raised in a really small town in Kentucky. My dad was in the Air Force. And growing up, after I was playing football, I had a bad injury. I wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon. There was nothing in life but medicine at that point. And then 9/11 happened, and that event kind of literally just steered my life towards medicine, but now another direction. I ended up enlisting in 2007, and then from there, I did 2 deployments, one to Afghanistan and one as a part of the 31st MEU. You guys will see Marine Corps units on my arm. I think it's this one. Yeah. Wasn't actually a Marine, a corpsman attached to the Marines. And I served with 3rd Recon Battalion, 1st Recon Battalion, and then 4th Recon Battalion until I picked up Chief. And it's been a cool experience. I'm actually getting ready to get retired, hopefully in the next few months from the military medically, because we found out that I had some congenital heart disease that nobody knew about. So that's kind of where we're at now. A part of that through my experiences, and I'm sure Ben kind of probably experienced similar things. Since I've gotten out of the military, I've lost more guys that I've served with to suicide that I knew. There were acquaintances that were friends. I lost more to suicide now than to combat. And that kind of became, motivation for me to pursue sort of a different medical career than I even thought. And it's leading me to TCU, where I'm pursuing my doctorate in nursing practice in psychiatry and mental health to really be able to make a difference. And a little more context to that. So right when I got back from Afghanistan, I did a TV show called Stars and Stripes. I got to meet Chris Kyle. He became a friend of mine, and he was really big on fitness and mental health because that's what really helped him heal. And I always promised him that I would do whatever I could to help his organization. I did some really cool stuff, Beast Mode for the Brave. We raised a ton of money. But then the realization is I was running myself a little bit ragged, and raising money is great. But if you want to be a part of the solution, you have to be boots on the ground. And that's where this whole sort of psychiatry aspect came in for me personally, because I know that when I got out, I had a terrible experience with a psychiatrist, that I didn't want people to experience that. And then furthermore, if somebody that I served with is going through something, I'm equipped to be able to handle that and provide the highest level of care possible to hopefully not have them become a statistic.
I love that, you've gone through life and stuff. And I'm going to let Ben ask you some questions here in a second, because I'm curious to find out, because Ben's also on that same path. But you went back and said you were on your way to do all these things. Then you found out, and this happens in life, like unexpected things. When I was 22, unexpectedly, I got type 1 diabetes. My pancreas stopped working. I didn't really understand anything about it. Doctor said, you're going to have to take shots the rest of your life. And I said, no, I'm not. He goes, well, then you're not going to survive. I said, okay, yes, I will. And then, but at that point, you're 22 years old. You're in the best shape of your life. Your pancreas stops and you have type 1 diabetes. Not in a million years, being an athlete, growing up and playing all these sports, and since I was 5 years old, all the way through high school and continuing, that I think I would get type 1 diabetes. You mentioned that you were going through life, and next thing you know, you had this thing. And Rex said this best on a few podcasts. Nobody is spared. We all have to go through sometimes really hard things. So let's go back to that real quick before we go forward. When you found out about this, heart condition, that you couldn't pursue the things that you wanted to do, mentally, what did that do to you, and physically, and your road ahead?
So mentally, like right now, initially it was a struggle because I own a CrossFit gym. One of the many things I do. You find out I have like jack of all trades, master of none, and CrossFit and heavy lifting was a huge part of my life. And the doctor's like, you have an aneurysm basically at your aortic root, and if you keep on lifting heavy weights, it's gonna tear. And then I have a bicuspid aortic valve, which is pretty much at some point in time me buying a valve replacement surgery. So processing that and realizing, okay, like I'm going to have to switch things up that I love was kind of difficult. But fortunately for me, and if anybody knows me, they're going to be like, oh my gosh, he's talking about high rocks. I just switched my training and found sort of a new goal that was cardiologist approved that I could go for. And it involved a lot of cardio. And if you know me from the past, like I'm cardio, but I just had to embrace it and, sort of own it. And it's been kind of healthy. And it's one of those things, I'm even taking a risk doing that, but I've explained it to a lot of people. They're like, oh, dude, you got to worry about your heart. You got to worry about your heart. I'm like, look, man, if I go down randomly, like at least I was doing what I loved. Like I didn't die sedentary. I didn't die and, sitting and feeling sorry for myself. Like I went out like I wanted to go out, and that was like pushing myself to the limits, doing hard things. So it's basically just not really, just letting something overcome you and saying, oh, well, you're done for. You need to, be still the rest of your life. Like, don't lift, don't move. Like, no, just find something that you can do and accept the risk and go for it. And with that said, if my cardiologist ever finds this, I go in for regular checkups, just like I'm supposed to. I haven't lifted as much weight. I'm just trying to run faster. So.
Right. Well, we're all guilty of that. I remember Rex had a stroke, and they're like, well, you can't play basketball. He plays basketball every morning. Sometimes doctors say you don't do this or do that. And then we do stuff that, that's going to make us happy or relieve stress or whatever that is. But you also said one more thing. You said with Chris Kyle, and you said raising a lot of money, great, but that wasn't enough. That you said boots on the ground. Explain that. So volunteering your time or trying to really help people without donating any money, just what did that look like?
So boots on the ground is basically this process. So I actually had to kind of step back from, helping out with the charity and the organization to focus on myself and my goals, to put myself in a position to be able to help people. And boots on the ground means basically being there a resource, talking to these guys and girls one-on-one, and being equipped to handle that from a professional standpoint. And, that's why, I've been in school since 2013 at this point. Like I'm doing my doctorate part-time, but I want to position myself that if somebody comes into my office and they've been to combat, they can identify with me. I can identify with them, because I know when I got out to the VA appointment, and I'm not bashing anybody who fits these demographics, but the lady might've been in her mid 60s. I looked at my chart, got 2 minutes in the conversation, and says, hey, you're going to be 100%. You have PTSD, all of these things. And I was like, whoa, stop right there. Like, you're not listening to me. I don't have PTSD. I don't have these symptoms. And she's like, well, you have anxiety when you came home, right? I'm like, yeah, but you didn't ask me why I had anxiety when I come home. And she's like, well, you're in combat, right? And I'm like, yes, but that doesn't mean I necessarily had PTSD. I was in Afghanistan for 5 months. But if you want to summarize and quantify it, I maybe was in 5 to 7 firefights, maybe a total of 2 hours. Like, it wasn't like it was this whole combat experience, because there's guys who, didn't work with the units that I worked with who were through a lot more. But you're not listening to me. So eventually it turned into this back and forth. And I eventually said, hey, look, if you write that I have PTSD down, I'm going to report you to the medical board. And I got up and I walked out the door. because she didn't want to listen to me. I couldn't identify with her. I couldn't have a conversation with her about what I'd been through to even talk to that. And it's no wonder if other veterans, especially, guys who have been in those situations, are talking to somebody and don't feel heard, can't connect and can't identify. They're going to walk out of office silent, not say anything, and go home and struggle with these battles. Because I don't want to assume much, but a lot of guys probably don't want to be on medications. A lot of guys probably have a hard time saying that they have issues. And then if they don't feel like heard and they just want to be given a diagnosis without going to the root of the problem or the cause of that issue, like they're just going to shut down and just go do what they think they, know is best. And unfortunately, sometimes those are, unhealthy habits and coping mechanisms. And then it turns into a disaster. And then now we have another statistic on our hand when all somebody needed to do was connect with them, listen, and then find out what would work for them.
Ben, you should jump in here. And, Ben's also had experience with VA and just finding the right counselor or finding the right therapist or whatever that looks like. And maybe can jump on and speak to that.
Yeah, I think listening to your story, I can connect with some of that. I think I had the opposite end of the age spectrum. I had my first counselor at the VA was right out of grad school and right away diagnosed me with PTSD, major depressive disorder. She probably wasn't wrong, but tried to use prolonged exposure therapy, which is a horribly ineffective treatment for combat veterans that's been found, but the VA obviously still believes in it and is purporting it. I think the question I have for you is, we may have found some similar barriers to care. One of the things I struggle with is getting guys to help our brothers and sisters that have been in there and done the things we've done and struggle with some things. And here we are, veterans trying to help veterans. In your studies or in your work, what do you find is some of the barrier that is keeping us from helping more of our people?
So we could talk about that subject all day.
Well, we got an hour, guys, so let's get to it.
So let me try and summarize that. I'm going to try to answer this to the best of my ability with it. But I think that, and this is like obviously an oxymoron, that it has to start with the government. But what I mean by that, it has to start when we're in the service, period. Like if you think about like the entire process of the military, like helping each other needs to start before you get out and be like a continuum of care sort of concept for these guys to be able to connect. And I don't mean like within your own tribe. I mean, this has to be some sort of, method or system that works for people who are going to be in the same general region. And what I mean by that is as guys are getting out, like they should be connected with somebody in their community. And I know they have the VFW, but I don't know about you, but when I got out, I thought the VFW was just for super, old individuals. Rex, not bashing you in the Air Force over there, but just
right there.
Wait, yeah, Matt.
I'm too old for the VFW, so
can't even get in.
Yeah, but you just have this concept that that's what the VFW is, so people don't reach out. So you have to start that connection before and looking for a mentor. And I don't know about you, but we had career development boards, and the career development boards were almost more of checking the boxes versus having a true vested interest in establishing that. And so everybody talks about upstream thinking, like that's when we have to start acknowledging that is before they get out, and not 6 months, not that like a year out. Like, hey, like what are you doing? Awesome. Well, hey, you know what? This is a list of people that we have in this system that can kind of help you. They went through college here. They did this here. This is the industry that they're in, and start the connections that way. So they have a plan before they get out to go. Because I know, and I don't know if it's the same for you, like when I got out, I had to figure out that I was going to go to community college. Like I had to live, my wife and I, with our newborn daughter, lived with her aunt for 4 months until we could figure out the whole VA system to buy a house, which nobody really discusses with you. They bring it up in a 6-hour class. So to really have that, we got to start ingraining that mindset, before we get out and be upstream about it versus like, okay, we're out, we're now seeing a counselor and now we're back in our hometown city or a new city where we don't know anybody. And now we're trying to make our way, with limited resources. And further upstream than that, like we should be preparing, our men and women to get out with resources to be able to excel in their jobs. Like for the medical field, I think that why don't we make every medic get their national paramedic certs? Right? Like, let's make sure that these individuals, they're going to go into avionics. Like, how do we get their, aircraft certs so they can roll into these jobs and just really, really start preparing them to get out? And then you connect them with a group of veterans and individuals in that area are probably within their unit there, then now they automatically have a tribe they can reach out to try to make it in life, versus basically starting a second career from square zero. Now you bring in PTSD, now you bring in depression and isolation, and it's creating a perfect storm. But to try to answer your question, how do we get people to help each other? There just has to be more accountability for each individual to realize that, they need to be a part of the solution. It might not be financially, but if you can make yourself known, readily available, and reach out within your community, you might be able to catch something before it happens. And that's just a huge part of it. Like, you have to take accountability for yourself and for those around you. And that can be very, very difficult, again, in the setting of PTSD, isolation, and everything, and fighting your own battles, trying to find your own way in life. But again, if we get upstream of it, we can meet somewhere in the middle. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah. Hey, this person was a mentor for me. You know what I want to do? I want to be a mentor for somebody else getting out.
Yeah. And you're talking about, and you're bringing up several different problems that we have to try to solve. And I think one of the big things is that idea of not understanding that we are going to get out of the military. And unfortunately, the way the system works is we're going to use you for what we need you for and prepare you for your job here only. And then when you get out, you're on your own. And unfortunately, there's a lot of that going on where we don't have preventative medicine. When you go into selection or you go into these higher level units, there's no mental health criteria. There's no organization of any kind of instruction or any kind of coping skill classes or anything like that. So it's all just get your job done and get out of here. But I think with some preventative care and the upstream thinking that you're talking about, we could handle a lot of these issues, or at least put a system in place that prepares guys to have help available to them, like you said, as soon as it's needed, instead of trying to figure it out after the fact. We just have a lot of issues there, and a system in the VA healthcare that's overwhelmed by volume, right? And so we don't have enough. So then we end up being veterans helping veterans, right? Guys like you and me that are saying, like, I have to do something about this. And then even that community is a little less connected than I'd like for it to be. It's hard to find everything that's available and all the people that are helping out there and doing things they're passionate about. So we need to figure out how to connect all of that.
It'd be great to have somebody some kind of organization to come in and make that easy for, some kind of something that organizes all that. And then when I talked to Talon last week before he came on the podcast, he was breaking down some numbers for me. I was telling him that Rex does 22 push-ups in the morning for, vets that commit suicide every day. And Talon's like, that number is way higher than 22. So I was like, I don't think Rex can do more than 22. I think he's right at.
I've got to keep it at 22 for now.
You got to keep it at 22. But then Talon also said most of the vets that are committing suicide, the number of them, like the majority of them are not even seeing combat. It's not even part of that. What am I wrong in saying that, Talon? What were you telling me?
No, so there are some studies, and again, like, you really have to dive into these studies, but I think this was a study released in 2021 said, like, the suicides were disproportionately, like, veterans not deployed to combat areas, which brings up a whole new slew of, questions that has to be asked, and, even processes that we have to think about. Because your first thought is the person who killed himself as a veteran must have seen horrible combat. And that's kind of turning out that narrative might not necessarily be true. So there's even more to dive into that, because I think it's total. And Ben, you can spot check me here. And again, this is doing like research and not super deep diving it, going back and checking through. But it's something like only 15% of the entire military is actually assigned combat MOSs. And then within that, you'll have non-assigned combat MOSs, which are attached as like a supportive unit, or a supportive, I can't find the word here, a support member to that unit who will deploy to combat with them. So when you think about that, like, it's relatively a small group of, combat MOS individuals. And then the number of those individuals who see combat is even smaller. So when you have a large group of people who are committing suicide, which don't necessarily fit that number, that means there's other things going on that aren't even being addressed, within the military itself. And that just creates a whole new sort of, cognitive process about how do we handle that if these aren't even going to combat. And I will say that survivor's guilt is a real thing. There's a lot of people who feel guilty for not deploying. Like, I have friends, reconnaissance Marines, snipers, who never went on a combat deployment. It's eaten at them to this day that they didn't have the opportunity to do that. They did their 4 years and they got out. And it's just.
And what do they feel guilty about because they don't get a chance to do what they were trained to do, or that some of the people that took their job, died, or it could have been them. Is there something with that?
I think it could be all of it, right? Like you train this hard, you put yourself through the most rigorous training, and like you wind up on a ship, you know, in the South Pacific, and you never get to go to Afghanistan. You never got to go to Iraq. You never got to serve alongside your brothers. But then every time you come back home, those guys who did deploy have this bond and this connection that you still have with them because they are your brothers, but it's not necessarily feel as deep. And you're hearing these stories and you're like, man, like I wish I was there with them. Or on the flip side, like undoubtedly, you know, it's a logical fallacy thinking that if you were there, something different would have happened, because the truth is the brothers that were there with them were the best equipped, most well-trained individuals to handle that situation. But it still doesn't slip in your mind that, man, if I was there, you know, like something would have been different, or like, you know, it's there. And the reality is, and Ben can attest to this, like, you know, the difference between somebody making it out of combat and somebody not making it out of combat, getting hit, is less than a millisecond. You blink your eye and something happens. You know, the guy shoots from, you know, 1 inch to the right or lines of sight up, and, you know, you're hit, or you step 1 foot to the right and you step on an ID versus you don't. So you can't ever really sit here and deep dive into that, or you will like put yourself into a deep hole. So it's just one of those things of like, even if you weren't over there, you can't overthink that, but it's natural to, when one of your friends that you've trained with, you know, you say goodbye to them on a deployment and you find out 2 months later that they're not coming home, like you're going to sit there and it's going to hurt. And I know, because that was me when I first got to Okinawa. Like it hurt. I still wrestle with it to this day. I said goodbye, I'll see you in a few months, and I got a call 2 months later, he was dead. It's there. And at that point, I had survivor's guilt. I hadn't been to combat at that point. So it's just, you know, it's real.
So mentally, Ben, how does somebody address that, or how do they cope on a daily basis when your brain throws that at you, like you're at the grocery store and then just all these emotions come out or something?
Yeah, it's actually one of the biggest struggles that I had. Survivor's guilt and moral injury are some things that are based on how you feel as a person about how effective you were at your job. And when you're talking about your brothers that were in combat, the people that you cared about, the people that were around your kids, or that you guys were in scrapes together, or you trained together, and all of these things, like Talon is saying, you can't stop your brain from creating that dialogue that says like, well, if you were there, it would have been different. Or if you had just done this, things could have changed, or it should have been you instead of them. You really can't stop that stimulus from presenting itself to you. One of the things that helped me the most was my own work with EMDR helped me through my survivor's guilt pathway to understand that my path was not theirs, and that they were doing something that they cared about and were passionate about, just like I was. And we had different pathways, and that was okay. It's really tough to come to terms with that when you're saying goodbye to people and when you're hugging their family members, you know, and their wives and stuff like that. So it's a terrible thing to go through for people, especially when they're home and they're not able to be in combat doing something about it. I know when we were able to, Talon, you might feel this way too, but when we were able to like jock up and go get on a helicopter and go to war, it made that stuff feel like I'm doing something about it. And for me, that was a remedy for a period of time. But when I stopped deploying and it got quiet, that was no longer the answer. And so these things are incredibly difficult to deal with. And they're things that can hit anyone who's attached to it, anyone who's connected to it at all, not just service members, but family members, other people who may have not been able to serve. And it's a real issue.
Absolutely.
Rex, do we have questions? Do we want to go to now, or do we want to keep this?
We have a lot of questions, most of them dealing with their own personal situations.
Gotcha.
So maybe keep,
okay.
You know, for example, this one, but we'll stay on the same thread. Dog Mom is saying, I've been going through a difficult diagnosis myself, so I can understand exactly what everyone is saying. I think everyone's relating this to them, and it as they should be. This is not all of these topics that we're discussing are just related to combat. They're coming out very descriptively because of the combat experience, but they aren't necessarily related to it. But as Ben told us before, trauma is trauma, you know, and people are just relating this to what is going on with them in their lives right now. I think that's what we want in our podcast.
So Talon, with getting out of the military and you're owning a gym, and I know you do some other things that you're a successful guy with, and you have this situation, you got wife and kids. How do you what are some of the things technically, because we like to talk about healing on this podcast because it's so important, because like you said, if you don't heal or try to heal, it can take you down a spiral, a bad spiral down. And then, there's people that lead to suicide. We've had some of our optimists come on come on our podcast and talk about, they got to the point where, they drove their car to this top of the hill and they were getting ready to, take a bottle of pills and die and kill themselves. So people, you don't have to be in military to, or have, like you guys said, seen some crazy stuff to get to this point. But what are some things that you do to get out of that mindset or to actually heal? And every day you wake up, you're like, I have something to look forward to. Is it being grateful, or like, what are some of the things that's helped you?
So for me, like, first of all, I will say my faith is huge. For everybody out there, like, oh, he's going to give you the Christian talk. First of all, I'm a Christian, but I'm very bad at it. I cuss like a sailor. I'm extremely impulsive. Like, I'm doing my best to read the Bible, but I forget that. But understand that there's a higher power, and I have grace, and I was forgiven by accepting Jesus Christ. Like, that's huge. That's forefront. And whenever I feel like I'm down, I like to look up, and I have my wife there to reinforce me and remind me that, just like she told me recently with something she's going through, that she laid it at God's feet. So first and foremost, it's going to be there. Obviously, like, I'm not going to evangelize here, but that's what I believe. But understanding that there's a higher power, and that, your life is, like, specifically created for a purpose and you need to live that out. That's number one. For something that somebody who might not have religion can relate to is, I have a purpose every single day. And when I wake up every single day, and I have my wife and my kids, or more of my kids. She better not be pregnant, but I have one kid right now.
Well, come on. Positive thinking, Talon.
Positive thinking. My daughter is amazing, but she is almost a teenager. And let me tell you, a teenager. Anyways, I digress.
You're not ready. You're not ready to restart with another new one, huh?
No, not yet. No, especially almost being 40. I'm not. Nope, no more. But to that point, I wake up with a purpose. I have my wife and my daughter. I also have a purpose in I want to really be there and prevent any of my friends from becoming a statistic. In all of this and all the money I've invested in school, all the time I've trained, if I can save one life and change one person, like, this entire struggle is worth it. And, and that's the case, is you have to find a purpose. You have to find a reason, and you have to keep on pushing. And suicide and those ideas, it's a permanent solution to a temporary problem. Like, there is hope, there's tomorrow, and there's days when you're going to feel like, I know I feel that way a lot lately with everything on my plate. Hey, look, man, there's no way out, but there really is. And the best way to put it, it's like what Marcus Luttrell said in Lone Survivor. He drew a line and he crawled to it. And I have to do that every day. I got to draw a line, say, I'm going to get there. And when I get there, guess what? I'm going to draw another line. I'm just going to keep going. Because ultimately what you'll find out is, through that journey, you're going to have strength and resilience. And you just have to keep going. Just 1% every day and just keep going. And then not only that, like, I have my outlets. Like, I focus on, my health. Like, I take care of myself. I exercise. That's my outlet. When I'm stressed out, I know what to do. I go to my outlet. And then, I would just say lastly is, just make your life about trying to serve other people. Because when you start serving other people, then every day that you need to be there for them. And it no longer becomes about you and your struggle. It's like, how can I help them? And when you start doing that and giving your time and knowing that your life has a purpose, you're just going to be on the right track. Because I promise you, even if you feel so alone or isolated, there's somebody right now that needs you. And you have to almost be self-sacrificing in this way and pour yourself out to them despite the pain that you're going through, and just keep on pushing on. And that's just my focus every single day. Because I know that right now, with everything I have in my life, I can't do what I would like to do to help as many people as I could outside of my job nursing. Like, that's insane. We'll hit that later.
Yeah.
But I can't function like I would like, because I have to get to this point to be able to make the maximum amount of impact. But that pursuit of that education, knowing that once I have my doctorate in psychiatry, and just the skills and the ability that it'll give me, it's worth that sacrifice, waking up every day and doing that.
Yeah, one thing you said about giving service or serving other people or doing that. Anytime you serve somebody, you end up loving that person, and then love is the key for everything, I think. So you end up, if you serve a stranger and you do something for a stranger, you don't expect anything back. The what you get back is you feel so good about helping that person, and you end up loving that person. Sometimes you don't even know them. Sometimes it's a family member, sometimes it's whatever. But serving other people is a great way to heal from the things that you are, obsessed with or thinking about in your mind, leaving all that and going to help somebody. And the other thing that you talked about that I talk to my clients about with my accountable is that physically we only have one body. We don't get 2, 3, 4. We don't get any other bodies we get one. And so you need to really take care of the body that you have, which means you need to work out, or you need to exercise, or you need to really watch what you eat. You really only have one body, and they're all connected. I believe that your body's connected to your soul and your mind. All three things are together. So the better you're in shape, the better you feel physically, mentally, and spiritually. Those things heal. And that's been my experience. What about you, Ben?
Yeah, I think that all three are connected, and it is, if you're sick in one way or depleted in one way, you can feel the effects in the other, right? If we're physically sick, a lot of times mentally we're not able to handle stress, or we can't cope with something that comes in. And I think, our souls can feel that pain when we're sick or injured or ill and things aren't being taken care of. And there's definitely science behind, probably Talon's studying right now or already has, behind the endorphin release and the positive effects of just being physically active, going outside in the sun, doing things that you enjoy. All of these things are producing chemicals in your body that help you feel better. And if you generally feel better, even the hard things that come in are manageable. And we talk a lot about that. We talk a lot about coping skills and how are you taking care of yourself. And I always mention the basics: food, water, and sleep. If your sleep is disrupted, you're going to have a depleted ability to cope, a depleted ability to be physical. And so you need to sleep, you need to drink water, you need to eat the right food. Those are the basic things. And then you can go and do the coping skills and the enjoyable things that help take stress off. I mean, it is all connected. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, I love the sleep thing. Sleeping is so important, especially when your wife's trying to get you up early on Saturday. Like, guys, I got to sleep. I have to get better. This is part of my healing process, getting that extra sleep.
Talon's got a teenager who's probably sleeping in. He probably can't.
Yeah, what time? What time does your daughter wake up? Like 11 in the morning?
Oh, mine?
On the weekends?
Oh no, she's actually up at like 6:30 or 7 every morning. So yeah, it's crazy. She just wakes up and goes. So she's not like me. Like I'm out.
Adam, let me put a couple of comments up. I know I'm stepping back a little bit, but Carrie Ann was just agreeing as they were talking about survivor's guilt, just contributing. And again, to just illustrate that everyone's taking their own perspective on what Ben and Talon are saying and relating it to themselves. Carrie Ann said, survivor's guilt is just as hard as grief. Combined together is like a bomb going off in your heart and mind. I kept thinking that if I was there when my mom had her heart attack, I could have saved her. That's just what we're talking about. It's not even a thought. The thought may not even be realistic, but it just keeps coming back to you and just eating at you. You really touch people deeply, Talon, when you're talking about on helping other people. Okay, and relating. Darlene Butler said, "Oh wow, Talon, you're right on point. That's how I was in nursing school." And then Linda Lou said, "I love your purpose, Talon. Thank you for being you." Talking about having a purpose and continuing on in that purpose. So you're really touching a lot of people here with these subjects. As I go back, let me throw this one in, not a subject we talked about, but Ben, if you would comment on Darlene's question here. Have you ever heard of EMDR helping with fibromyalgia?
Not necessarily. And Talon, you might have some information here for help with fibromyalgia. We would put this more in the category of chronic pain. from a mental health standpoint, I know that sounds weird because it's a physical pain. And so we're talking about chronic pain as a mental health issue. I have not heard of EMDR being helpful for fibromyalgia specifically, but if you attach that to some kind of shame or grief in your own head, like I'm unable to do the things I like, or I can't be there to support the people that I care about, and you start feeling bad about yourself or about the things that you're unable to do, certainly EMDR can be used in that space. From a physical standpoint and a mental standpoint, trying to connect those, I think maybe a chronic pain treatment plan would be more beneficial in that case, unless it's attached to your own kind of idea of shame or guilt because of what your limitations are with that pain and with that struggle.
Yeah, my EMDR PowerPoint's waiting on this laptop for later. So I wish I could get back to you on that, but that's what I'm studying right now. So there, but yeah, fibromyalgia, like we in the hospital, we treat it as chronic pain. Like you said, there may be a link, but Ben already said, pretty much anything that I would have had to say as well. So.
And Talon, we've had Ben on several times, probably 5 or 6 times. And one of the many good things he taught us, I'd like to get your perspective. Maybe you have a slightly different view of this. We've asked Ben before, when someone realizes they're dealing with trauma, personal trauma from their past, whatever it is, what's the first thing they need? What are the first thing or two that they need when they say, I just can't handle this. I'm in too deep. I'm dealing with something. I'm not even quite sure what it is. What do they need right away? And then what do they need right after that, do you think?
So first of all, they did the first step, and that's acknowledging it. Second of all, if it's me and and something hits me, like I just say a prayer. I'm like, Lord, just help me get through this right now. Let me stay calm. Let me stay collected. And then generally, and I don't recommend this for anyone, I'm advocating talking. I've developed processes since I was in the military to help myself work through this. If it gets bad, I'll talk to my wife. If it's real bad, my wife will know. But I'll take the steps and process it. And then first I'm like, okay, cool. Like this is bad. I'm going through something. My first question is, why am I going through this? Is it something that I did? Is it something that I can't control? Or is it something that somebody else is doing that I can detach myself from? So I start running through this entire mental checklist. I don't necessarily recommend that because, again, I've been doing this for years and I've gotten to a good place where this is healthy for me. Does that make sense? So I wouldn't necessarily recommend this. But if they ask why, what's causing it, and they need to find somebody to talk to. So the biggest thing that I think people miss is, well put together as I look, like my life is chaos. Everybody's going through something. We all have our own struggles. And if you ask why, what's going through this and reach out to somebody, you will be so surprised about how many people have experienced this. And I'm not saying old people know it all, but Rex might be the first person that I ask here if they've gone through it, right? I'm kidding. But you want to have somebody who has some wisdom or maybe has been through a few things, right? Like I'm not going to ask my 12-year-old daughter, like, hey, like, what's it like having to make a huge business decision because right now I don't know what to do and I feel like my brain's going to implode. Like, I'm not going to do that. Or, hey, like, I'm feeling super sad and depressed. Like, what would you do? She'd be like, I'm going to play Roblox and call my friends. I'm like, that's great. That might not work for me. But see somebody with wisdom and acknowledge the answer. Yeah. Yeah, Roblox and Friends is great. Like right now, that's where we're at. We're working on that one though. We just had a talk today. But no, you need to talk to somebody and realize that, you know what, I'm not the only one with this problem. Like I'm not the only one who's been through this. Like most people, and I tell everybody differently, like I might have been to combat. I have my own life struggles, but we all walk our very own paths in lives. And our challenges, you can't quantify your challenge to somebody else's, but it's still valid. It's still difficult. And you still have to process a way to get through it. And just because I might not have necessarily been through, let's say, for example, like having a young lady whose mother had a heart attack, but by the way, prayers to you and your family, like that's terrible. Like I still have my mom and dad around. I'm grateful for that, but I've experienced loss. I can identify with you with loss quite a bit. And there's a conversation that can be had about, hey, how did you really cope with this loss? Well, this is what I had to do, and, like for her, anybody would feel that way, that they wish that they were there to do something, just like I'd wished I was there for my friends, that I wished I was on this deployment. But the reality is there's things that we control and things we can't control. And like Ben said, like God has a plan for us all. My path is my path. Your path is your path. And, if you get too caught up in that, it'll take you down a dark path. But my whole point, not to digress, is that we all have challenges. Might not be the exact same challenge, but people can identify with struggles that you've been through if you give them the opportunity. But just make sure you know them, you trust them, and again, they have wisdom. And
so you mentioned a couple things. So when people do have something and they want to talk to somebody about it, usually the comes in your mind is, people tell me you need to go to a therapist. You've been through too much. You have to go to a therapist. And there's probably some things in there that a therapist would be great, but like, who do you trust with the deepest things that are going inside you? Do you even tell your family members or your friends? Because a lot of us, don't want to put burdens on other people. And sometimes you feel like if you're going to unload something on somebody, that's going to be heavy on them, and you don't want them to have to go through it. Or do you just go find a therapist that is a stranger that knows nothing about you, and you unload it there? But then again, like you said, and Ben has said, if you go to a therapist that you don't bond with, you'll just get up and walk out. Like, there's no way you're going to sit there and try to have a conversation when that's not the thing. So, like, who do you talk to? Like, is there people that in your mind you go to first, like your parents or your best friend, or do you feel guilty about unloading your stuff on somebody else?
I wouldn't say that I necessarily feel guilty. I think for me personally, it comes back to, like, again, where am I at? Am I dealing with this? Like, can I deal with this? The second that I can't deal with it, I have friends that I'll go and talk to. That's and cool. I will say that a true friendship should be able to stand the test of whatever trial you're experiencing and not be judgmental, but be supportive. And if you can't go to somebody like that, then I'm not saying reevaluate that friendship and ditch them, but then evaluate what that friendship really is for you. You should be able to go to a friend or somebody and really be able to say that. If it's because of your own embarrassment, and I'll say this, a lot of people don't seek help because they're ego. Period. It's ego because they're worried about it. I can tell you right now, again, that there's people and their struggles, and guess what? They might actually be dealing with it. You might bring up something and they might be like, you know what, man, I just want to be straight with you. I'm going through the same thing too. And you'll be like, wait, what? It's just that thing where you have to be vulnerable, and vulnerability scares you. And then if you go to that person, and I'm not saying you won't be burnt. I'm sure the listeners here can be like, hey, I told my friend, they told everybody, it went south. Like, I apologize for that. And I hate that you had to do that, but that's not going to be every single friend that you talk to. That's a one-off, but you have to be vulnerable and put your ego aside, because if not, you're going to hold it in there. And, it's like I said, like, I'm running through my list. If I can't handle it, like, I'm going to go talk to somebody immediately. Like, I have they're actually they're mentors to me, but they just happen to be my friends. They're very, very successful individuals. But if I start going south, like, John knows he's going to be getting a call. Like, he knows, and I know he's going to be there. And that's very, very important. If you question if that friend's going to be there, they might not be the right person, and you might need to go to a therapist. But then again, as you guys have said, it might not be the right choice. Yeah. But you have to understand and put your ego aside and be vulnerable, or else you're going to eat yourself alive. You're going to overthink. You're not going to sleep, and it's going to spiral downward. You have to be vulnerable. It's hard to say, especially from my standpoint, to do that, because I'm not the most vulnerable person. But when it comes down to it, and I have to be, like, it's there. I've had tough conversations with my wife that I didn't want to have with her, but I had to, or else I was going to sit there and be eaten alive by it. And, like, this is even relevant. Like, everybody's like, oh, he's so collected. Like, a month ago, I was going through some stuff. Me and my wife got into it, and I looked at her and I said, I am not okay. And, like, we were in an argument, full blown, and just full transparency. Like, we're in a screaming argument, and me and my wife almost never fight anymore. And I just said, I am not okay. I need you to stop right now. She stopped. We calmed down. We talked about it. And she's like, you know what? She's like, I knew you were acting different. I knew you were going through it. I just wanted you to come to me. And I'm like, well, hey, look, like, this is it. And she's like, you know what? I understand. I get it. And I'm sorry. And we moved on from there. We had the conversation. I felt much better. And, like, 3 days later, I was great.
That's awesome. I completely agree with what you're talking about. That what I hear you saying is that connection is so important. And I've told these guys before, I think I say it a lot with my clients, is that connection is the antidote to PTSD, depression, anxiety, all of these things. You're talking about reaching out to somebody that you trust, somebody who cares about you, who's going to support you. There's numbers like 988. That's the 24/7 manned hotline where you can just blow off steam with anybody. And if you're a veteran, you can press 2 when you get to the voice prompt, and it takes you to somebody who's competent in veteran care. So you can always talk to somebody. If you don't have a wife or a spouse or a good friend or a mentor to reach out to, I think that connection is the key. And I think you're right, Talon. A lot of that is ego, where we say, I can handle this myself, or I should be able to handle this myself. I'm smart enough. I'm capable. Like, I'm going to just not put this burden on somebody else, like you said, Adam. And that's a
Yeah.
tough thing, but we need to realize that vulnerability is the first part of us being able to connect with another person, and realizing then a lot of times that other person has similar circumstances or other things they can connect to you on because they've been through something. And you have this perspective that other people are a certain thing from the outside until you communicate with them, until you connect and you learn that you're struggling through similar things, or you have a friend who has, and you can really get some relief from that.
Absolutely. I just want to hit on that social isolation part. So I'm working on my DMP scholarly project. And one of the things that I don't feel like is properly addressed is a social isolation aspect. And I think I talked about this with my bud. And I think that maybe for people out there who weren't in the military, who can understand social isolation, think back to the pandemic, how you felt when you were alone, struggling maybe with the loss of a loved one, and that social isolation. And just to carry that over, like, you're not going to progress or get to where you need to be carrying that burden by yourself. It's like, how do you want to move like 1,000-pound barbell? Well, I'd rather have my two friends on the side, me in the middle, and we can all pick it up together versus trying to sit there and break my back. And, you know, those who are close to you and you can trust, like, they're going to pick up the barbell with you. It's not going to be fun, but they're going to do it and they'll be there. And then that's a huge thing. But yeah, my project is basically focused on community-based fitness classes, in accordance or in conjunction with CBT, and decreasing the symptoms of depression. So you can't just go work out by yourself. You have to go to a fitness class and be in CBT, because both CBT and fitness, the evidence of it is unbelievable. So now you combine the two, take out the isolation aspect and put them in a community setting. And I think that, you know, that could eventually one day be a first-line prescription for, you know, treating depression before we go to SSRIs. With certain medications, they are first-line treatments. But if you look at the side effects, like decreased libido, right, possibly worsening depression, weight gain, and all that, that's going to make you more depressed. So there's got to be ways that we can kind of navigate that as well. So that's what my project is again, battling that social isolation and having connection. But just kind of go back to what Ben said, like having that connection, like that is so critical. Like we are made for connection as human beings. And this is going to sound so weird, like with me talking here, people don't believe it, but like I'm like 99% an introvert unless I'm at work or at the gym. Like if I don't know you, I'm not talking to you. But I get my connection through work and, you know, working as an ER nurse and at the gym.
I see that a lot. And I've talked, I've been on the radio for a long time and, interviewed tons of people, and you'll see people that are introverts, but when they are in a certain circumstance or a certain place, they are as extrovert as you've seen. Like they can switch it on or off to do the things that they're passionate about or that they feel good about, and they want to talk about certain things. But then if you go like into a spot where they don't want to go, they come back down, they suck it in. But like you said, with connection, and you're mentioning all these great things, you and Ben are very similar in your approach to helping vets, trying to make connections with and trying to find people to help vets make these connections. Because, a lot of these, we're talking about all these suicides with, vets, and on a daily basis, obviously Rex does 22 push-ups, but we know there's more than 22 in a day. That how do we stop the problem? How do we get to these people before they kill themselves? How do we get to that pathway? And I think just doing this podcast alone, just today, sending this out to as many people that can watch it, that's the things that you and Ben have added to this podcast so far, should help a lot of people who may be headed that way without really even knowing they're heading that way. The different therapies and the different things to think about and the perspective of life and being grateful and serving people and all those different things can really change somebody's mindset from spiraling on their way down to stopping them and then, bringing their lives back up again.
Yeah. I mean, it's not easy. Like all this stuff sounds great in theory, right? And I'm sure Ben can attest to this, but putting this into practice is so difficult. You have to be so intentional and disciplined to it. And that's a big piece that can be missed easily, is that like you might reach out one time to somebody and it might not work. You might get your heart broken, but you have to be able to and willing to do that again, right? You might go help somebody, and guess what? Like things don't work out well, you're not able to help them. Or you might have to, you know, constantly give back to people and you're not feeling anything in return or any better, but it's going to have to be consistency and discipline. Like, this isn't easy. And I think, you know, that it's almost crazy, because like when you're young, you think life's going to be great. It's going to be amazing. But innately, life is 99%, in my opinion, not 99%. Like, I'm not a pessimist.
Are you downgrading everything? Come on, let's at least give it 85%.
85. Life is 80%, 85% a struggle, right? Like, we all work hard, we all do that, we all face struggles. It's a struggle, and you constantly have to work at it to get to a point and a place in your life where you're happy. And you have to find ways to navigate these struggles. And, you know, Ben has brought great ways to do that together. And it is what it is. And with the suicides in the military, you know, it has to be upstream thinking. And also, it's part of what we said earlier, you know, despite what we might do, despite how we might connect veterans, we're not going to be able to save them all from making that decision. It's just, it's a fact. But if we can start making the impact and start, hopefully, you know, moving things forward, it's going to take a long time to get to where we want to be. We can get upstream of these issues before it becomes an issue. You know, like, there's plenty of things that I can address, like right now, like having stress cards in the military. So when somebody feels stressed, they get to tap out. But the reality in life is, like, you don't get to tap out. Like, I'm an ER nurse, you know, I had a code that lasted 3.5 hours trying to revive somebody, and it didn't work. Right? Like, I didn't get to tap out in the middle of a code and say, hey guys, I'm tired from doing CPR. Like, maybe we need to take a minute. Like, no, like, you have to keep going. And life is so much like that. Like, you just have to keep going and keep working at it. You don't get to tap out. So even establishing that in the military where they get a stress card, like, I understand that they're trying to do it for the mental health, but like, don't give them a stress card. Like, teach them a way, to Ben's point, to become mentally resilient and push past that and to cope with what's going on right now, and use that as a teachable moment versus saying, hey, you know what, you're too stressed. Like, let's do that. Because the reality is, life is stressful. Combat's even more stressful. And it's not even, and I don't know, Ben can probably attest this, it wasn't even stressful for me. I was more worried about my brothers beside me. Like, if I got hit, it was whatever, like, done, cool. Like, I went out in combat, like, checked that flag, did it, most honorable death you can have. Done. I was more worried about my brothers, you know, beside me.
Yeah, I completely agree. And there's so much that you get from helping other people. So I think the kind of mantra that I say to my clients and to others who are looking to help other people is, like, treat yourself first. You know, be healthy, and then use that as a ripple effect to help other people be healthy. You've gone through it, you've helped yourself. You know, the old trope of, like, putting on the oxygen mask on yourself first, and then you can help other people with it on the airplane. It's the same thing. Get healthy, do the things that help you, and then help other people to get there. And there's a great benefit from post-traumatic growth. Like, after you've had traumatic experience, you've been through something, you've learned how to deal with it. When you help others from that capacity, it generates this feeling inside of yourself that you were talking about before, Talon, about having a purpose every day. You know, feeling like there were people that were benefiting from your presence or from your work or from what you're doing. And it's a huge difference to being depressed or beating yourself up or having those constant internal battles. You know, if you're helping other people, those things tend to slip away. They tend to be a lot more quiet in your own head.
Absolutely.
Couple things real quick. So, you know, you were talking about you and your wife having a full out screaming match at each other. Ben was shaking his head because Ben is married as well. And him and Alice have been, his wife has been on and she's talked about how she's tried to help Ben with PTS. And she's also having to do all these struggles. And they came up with something I thought was so cool that helped them and their kids. Is on Sunday night, they let everybody come to dinner. They have the same dinner every Sunday night, and you can say anything you want at the dinner table on that night. And you know, you got high school kids, you got teenagers. They're like, wait, I can say anything? They're like, just let it rip, right? Let it go. So maybe you and your wife and your daughter may want to try that and just see how that goes, and see if there's some therapy going on a Sunday night dinner.
They say whatever they want every day. So
okay, so there's no.
So her and my daughter will let me know immediately. Like, I have no questions.
That's the difference. I have boys, so you have a daughter. That's totally different.
Yeah, that is different, right?
The girls say whatever they want.
And then you mentioned like 85-15 struggle. When you get around Rex's age and stuff, it's 50-50. He's got 50% of enjoyment, 50% struggle.
Absolutely.
So I'm way on the other end of that. It's almost
you're probably 85 pleasure and 15% struggle.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Well, you know who I'm married to. That has a lot to do with
Yeah,
it.
you married up.
Hey,
Any
that's the goal.
other questions or last thoughts? We're running up. We got 5 minutes because I am going to a D-back game. They're getting ready to get into the playoffs, so we gotta
Let me
we
say
gotta get
this.
to the important things.
I want to encourage everybody to get back to the comments when this posts finally. Get to the comments if you can and read the conversations that are going on just amongst the listeners, not comments we're putting on, but to each other about their situations. It's really heartwarming. People are relating this to themselves. They're getting a lot of good. They're expressing love, support for each other, and getting a lot out of the whole experience here. Listening to Talon and Ben, yes, but also to each other. And we love that dynamic here. Of course, we have people helping out, like Dr. Vonda Kay gives a great perspective also when she's on, and just having great interactions with each other. Ana Franco is helping out, and Carrie Ann. So come back and read those comments. I don't think the podcast comments are posted right away. It takes a little while, but I'd encourage everyone to come back and read those. People are getting a lot out of this. Of course, then there'll be the comments on the actual podcast too, in addition to the live comments on the side. Adam, we have to remember, I almost forgot this too. You and I are coming on live Tuesday evening at 5:30 Central, 4:30 Mountain. That's our once a month live kind of a State of the Union, but we will keep doing podcasts as guests, tremendous guests like Talon are available. Ben has some people lined up. Ben, is there anyone that's scheduled or for certain times, or you working that?
No, not yet. We're still playing the schedule game. It's the hardest game to win. We play it often.
And then Talon too, if you know anybody that's a vet that has a story kind of like your story or a completely different story that wouldn't mind sharing it just to get the word out to help other vets and those kinds of things, we would love to have them on as well.
I can send you some text messages. I know some pretty cool and involved people.
Nice. Yeah. Well, definitely. I think we learn every time we do a podcast, we learn new things every single time, even if we talk about the same subjects.
Yeah, and this has been tremendous. Darlene says, yes, it's been a fantastic episode. She's expressing what I think all of us feel, but she's thanking Talon and Ben also for being on, as many people did. Again, come back to the comments. You'll find a lot more than this one. It has been an amazing, as Missy said too, she's telling everyone, please take a moment to like the episode before you leave. This has been an amazing show. Thanks, guys. And maybe we should stop there unless there are any closing thoughts. Talon will give you the chance first, and then Ben, any thoughts from this or any projects you want to make us aware of that you are?
Yeah, plug something, Talon. You got like 50 jobs. Go ahead.
I don't really want to plug something, but I just want to remember everybody out there that we're all innately human. We all have struggles. None of us are perfect, right? So give yourself some grace. And again, don't have an ego. Reach out to people. People will listen to you. Maybe one person won't, but there's somebody who will. And we're all facing struggles. As much as I can sit here and talk, I have my own stuff that I deal with and I go through, and I'm not perfect. And it's life. And it's a hard part of life. But if you approach it right with a little bit of vulnerability and let your ego go, you can work through it. All right. We all have struggles. Every person does. Elon Musk has struggles. I promise. He's got 9 baby mamas, and he's building a rocket. We all have struggles. So,
right.
I hope I don't get flack for that one. We'll see.
You think because people have money that they don't have problems? That's
exactly
opposite. People with a lot of money have a lot of problems.
Every walk of life, every scenario, and you're not less of a person for speaking about it, struggling with it. We all go through it. So reach out, and it's I tell everybody, there's no reason to become a statistic when you can become a part of the solution for somebody, and your story has power. Your life has power. So use it to the best of your ability, because you don't know in any given moment how you'll impact somebody else's life for the better just by being you.
Exactly. Ben, any closing comments?
That's big. Talon, I want to thank you for doing what you're doing. and let you know I've been there having a wife and kid and going to school and working all at the same time to try to get through, school to do mental health. You're going to do great things. You already are helping other people. So keep your head up, keep driving. I think you're awesome and you're doing the right thing. So thanks for helping our brothers and sisters.
Well, thank you as well. That's awesome. You're there doing it, man. So keep on working hard. Since we've been best friends since we've grown up and know each other.
You like how I started the You like how I started the podcast with that? Did we just become best friends? We're doing a Step Brothers too here.
Oh,
it gets better. It gets easier. You're doing good things.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Very good. Thank you, man. And Adam and I will see y'all on Tuesday.
All right. See you guys.
All right. Take care. Have a nice night.